Okay, good to go.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Product People community meetup. We are joined with Jonathan Steingiesser. Is that correct, Jonathan? I did ask you that, but I hope I said it correctly.
Okay.
I will just give a little background to myself. So I work with product people in product management. I've got 10 plus years working in product, also had roles as COO, working in app development agencies and focusing on growth roles specifically within usually tech startups or tech scale-ups, one of which is where I actually met Jonathan. What we do at Product People is we help companies discover and deliver great products faster. How we do that is we work with companies as a product manager on an interim basis, and that normally is anywhere between 3 and 12-month engagements. So we step in when they need help, or someone's gone on vacation, or someone's gone on parental leave, for example. We step in and get things moving. So our specialty is onboarding fast, aligning teams, and delivering results. And we also have a product community, which you are a part of. So thank you for that. With now 6,000 members, Mansoor. I think that's grown since I last presented. So that's really good to see. So yeah, thank you for being a part of that group. This is our wonderful team. We're fully distributed across the globe in all corners of the world, but we have our headquarters based in Berlin, which is where myself and Mirella Mus is the founder in the top left there. We are based here. Our clients, we have a huge range of clients and it's constantly growing. Some of these you might recognize. A lot of these are European companies if you're based in Europe. So Scout24, Zalando, Tia, WeShare, Techstars and others. And we're actually hiring. We're hiring a lot, and we've had a big growth in our team recently. So if you're interested in product management and you're interested to work with a portfolio of clients, we would love to hear from you. So you can check us out on productpeople.join.com. Not thank you yet. Lastly, I would like to welcome Jonathan. So Jonathan is the head of design at Property Finder in Dubai, and divides his time between leading the design team, design strategy, customer research, and service design improvements. You have over 17 years experience and is the founder of the Human-Centered Design UAE meetup and co-organizer of Service Design in Perth, where I actually met Jonathan as well in Perth, and UX Melbourne meetups in Australia. So very experienced in this domain, and we're very lucky to be hearing from him today. We'll be understanding what a design sprint is, when and how to run them effectively. And there may be some opportunity at the end to ask some questions. So think of your questions and feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll ask them to Jonathan at the end of the session. So I will pass over to you, Jonathan, if you want to share your presentation. I'll stop sharing.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Cool. You can see the screen okay? Awesome.
Yes, perfect.
So yeah, just super quick intro, as Chloe was saying. Really excited to be here. It's awesome. You know, one of the positives I think that's come out of the sad reality we all live in of you know, the pandemic is that these communities are all getting connected, and these best kept secrets that were in these different cities that didn't really necessarily speak to each other are now fully connected, and it's yeah, it's really awesome. Encourage everyone, add me on LinkedIn. I always love to give back and to you know, share or collaborate, or you know, ask you questions. We're always learning, right? Head of design at Property Finder, which is a property portal like you have anywhere in the world for renting, buying property. And as Chloe said, also the founder of Human-Centered Design UAE. So yeah, if you're interested in future meetups, we meet once a month as well. And I'll be talking today about a design sprint. So just before I get into that, I've been at Property Finder for 2 years. And my role is very much to work with product people, with product managers across all areas, both B2B and B2C. And not only manage the design team, but work on product strategy and ensure that design feeds into that product strategy. And we also have, collaboration with other teams where sometimes we're in our silos and to just help bring that out, of the silo. So I'll talk a little bit briefly about what a design sprint is. I don't want to be too much into the theory world. A lot of you can easily Google this or, read Jake Knapp's book. There's a lot on this out there. What is more interesting, I find in this, is to get away from the theory and share a couple of very different case studies. But also what I'd encourage all of you to, and you'll hear this theme throughout my talk, is to experiment and to break away from, there is no perfect solution. There's no perfect formula for anything. It's about having the experience and experimentation and growth mindset to try different things at different times and see what works for you and what works with what situation. There's no, you have to do it this way or that way. So I'll talk about a design sprint I ran for a consultancy back in Australia called Isobar, and what we did for that particular client, as well as the work I did where I met Chloe at a very cool startup. They're doing really well and still growing functionally, that had very remote teams pre-pandemic, but mostly half the team in the US, the other half in Australia, and the entire thing was done on Zoom and Miro. So how do you do a remote design sprint, and pros and cons, and try to wrap it up and hopefully have time as well for Q&A. So what's a design sprint? You're all quite probably familiar with this. Traditionally, we have an idea. We hopefully will do some research. We then maybe even, do a little bit of, design can sometimes be a bit waterfall, and we maybe take a bit too long with some things. We build it, we launch it, and we learn. And a design sprint is about shortcutting that entire process, so we can try to learn as quickly as possible. Now, it's not something that you necessarily do all of the time for everything, but there are quite a lot of cases, in most use cases, you can go from an idea to a concept and try to get some very early validation, because the sooner we get feedback, the sooner we can pivot and just test our hypotheses. I think one of the challenges we often have is that we're quite married to our ideas and our solutions. And even as designers, as product people, we're aware of them. We still sometimes just have that confirmation bias, and we're so locked in on our idea that we don't actually pivot based on feedback or test or learn early enough. So I think that's where a sprint can really help. It's a five-day process of answering critical business questions through design, prototyping, testing with customers. So this is what is out of the book. There's a famous book by Jake Knapp from Google Ventures, and the book's very practical, so I'd encourage you to check it out. But like I said, that's the traditional thing. What it can be 3 days, it can be 10 days, it could be a few different workshops. So it really depends on who you are. Are you a consultant trying to stretch this out and make do as many workshops as you possibly can and try to get as much money you can? Or are you, like myself, client side, and you've got a lot of busy people from different departments? You want to get alignment and bring them together, and you may not have it can take 5 days out in a whole week straight, or even in periods of time, which is the situation I'm in right now. The funny coincidence of what is the minimum viable design sprint that we need. So it's something for you to consider. And basically, one of the other benefits besides getting to be able to test that idea quickly is alignment. So the start of a sprint really is a cross-functional team looking at what is the current state. We don't do this often enough. What does a journey map look like for our product? Do we have all of the data from our customer support team, our sales team around churn rates, from the usage of our features? We often have too many features that our customers don't actually use. Do we have research, qualitative, quantitative, etc.? Bringing all that into the table with a cross-functional team and just aligning on the challenge is a key part of the experience, and not having that solution already in mind. So going through the process. And by the end of the week or by the end of your set of workshops, ideally you would have created a prototype. So getting people to, to do some sketching, and you validate that prototype with hopefully real customers. So you get that early feedback just on some sketches. So it's basically a quick way of doing design or product, right? So why a design sprint? What are the benefits? It helps you to focus your team on the, make sure we are looking at the same problem. Sometimes, we're looking at different problems and we've got different ideas. We're aligning our organization on the knowledge that we have today. It's super efficient. Everything is time constrained. It's not about, getting in a room and keep going around in circles or arguing. It's about having, and I'll show in a minute, like decision maker, time boxed activities that we then, move through. And the other really important bit, as I said, is validation. So you're getting to a prototype as quickly as we possibly can, so we can get early feedback, we can learn, we can iterate, and we continuously do this, of course, right? So how do we run a design sprint? We need a big challenge, a team of ideally 5 to 7 people. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but that's kind of like the ideal thing. Like you all know, you don't want to design by committee or build product by committee and have too many. So you need key stakeholders, and you need to handpick some of these people. Who are the subject matter experts? Who's the person that's not going to create conflict? If you know that will be created, then perhaps that's not the best person to be in there. A facilitator who has the experience and confidence to run this, super important. A decider, also really important. Someone to just say, okay, whatever, like let's not vote, that's the decision, and move on. And you should do this ahead of time, have those 5 users, could be a little bit less, a little bit more, again, ideally 5, to test your prototype by the end of the week or by the end of the sprint. So book them in advance, basically. So what do we need? We need to be able to note and vote, which is a common technique I'm sure a lot of you are used to, in order to get around big decisions. So when we've got a lot of ideas, a lot of how might we's, a lot of challenges, and we want to really focus on the MVP or whatever we want to focus on, we want to continuously be able to vote, to make a decision and move on, as well as ensure that every activity that this week, these days are planned. It's really specific at what we will do, how we will do it. I'm going to talk about some great resources, so I'll make sure that Chloe has them at the end. Google Ventures have an awesome website that you can download the presentations. It's all open source. You can modify it for yourself or just use it. And how you want to do this, if you want to do what kind of sprint you want to do, like all of that's in there. So I think that's a great resource to have. You also need to have, some just common challenges as well. And, let me rephrase, like as many organizations, I think to try to, even introduce something like this, you need to have that buy-in. You need to have, alignment and expectations of what this is and what you're trying to introduce. But if you are in a place, I think, where this is difficult, you can introduce this in a small and, like a couple of workshops even around ideation, for example, and just, getting stakeholder buy-in. I think often it's not just the output of what comes out of the sprint. It's just the fact that you're getting cross-functional teams in a room together. The fact that they were a part of creating the solution already helps you later on when you need to get that buy-in. So it's about ensuring that they're involved from the very start, not, typically product, we do our thing and we sometimes just forget that those other departments exist or want or have a voice, and ensuring that we include them. Sales, for example, super important. And of course, strategy, other parts of the business. I'm flying through this, I might slow down a little bit. So I'm going to share now these case studies. As I said, one was an agency, a consultancy, Isobar, and the other one was a startup. The agency one I'll talk about initially, that that was an in-person experience. So we had a client to come to us, an engineer, and this is where a design sprint is great. So solving a really big problem. And the engineer came to us with an idea, a very, super low fidelity spreadsheet, which was basically, his screen. And he had a small team, but in essence, there were 3 people. That was the client. And they had a very small window of when to, deliver working software. And I'll talk about, what we did, the end results, the lessons learned, as well as, kind of wrapping up, conclusion a little bit as well. So as I was saying, the challenge was their initial name, horrible long name, as you can see. They wanted a new name. That was what they asked us to as well. It wasn't just creating a logo, creating a design, creating a software. It was create everything for us. It was offshore decommissioning consultants. Later, there was an interesting discussion. I mean, they picked the final name around Latin names and etc. Agera was the final name. As I said, complex engineering, very limited time. So they came in late November, and there was a big oil and gas conference in Perth in, I think it was March, something like that. So there was a very small window of time to get to working software that is not necessarily, in a close enough state to be able to launch, right? There were limitations, and they had never done product or design before. So there was only budget for 1 design sprint and 3 development sprints. So, 6 weeks worth of development. Access to the target audience for research, super challenging, because this is a real niche thing. We were able to get some, but that was a big challenge. And as I said, there's no name, no brand, not a huge amount of, restrictions. And we just needed to, kind of use our expertise to, how to tackle this. So tapping into, like I said, combining the traditional sprint and the activities and amalgamating what extra bits you need to do. So like day 1 is quite typical, you'll see, of a design sprint. There's a lot to cover in day 1. You basically want to, understand the vision, the goals. Everyone's writing, how might we solve whatever challenge throughout the day on Post-its. We want to understand the current journey. This is something that I add on as an extra kind of a design thing. So how are people solving this problem today? Regardless if it's any startup, nothing's new under the sun. Really important to have a baseline and understand how do we do this today? Who is the user? Maybe create some proto personas. And by the end of the day, get to an elevator pitch of what we're trying to do. Day 2 is about taking all of that. And day 1, it's really important that everyone involved, even like your engineers, for example, buy in and understand. It's like your big kickoff, right? We have alignment on what are we doing and why. Day 2, we kind of divided and conquered. Again, because I'm in a consultancy, it's different because everyone's time is, needs to be billable. You can't have everyone doing everything like we sometimes do, client side. So it was very much the designers looking at some success metrics. How would what would success look like? Let's, create some measurement there, but very much storyboarding. So taking the vision and at a high level, looking at a storyboard. What would this look like? At a high level, without jumping into screens. Something we've added, which is not typical of a design sprint, is this, brand and identity, where we just looked at, sharing some of our ideas and getting, buy-in from the client. We then moved on to a bit more fidelity. So there was some sketching as well on day 3 in ideation, and you're moving down to then starting to create a prototype and planning that, the interview guide for testing. And then you've got, a day full of testing. I've kind of gone into too much detail, which I remember, unfortunately, I do from time to time. So again, day 1, we're here in the, in terms of the double diamond, looking at going wide, discovery before defining. Some of the, kind of the artifacts, as I said, that come out of it is throughout the day, we're writing Post-its on, how might we solve, this particular challenge. We've got really important. We've got our current journey. So you've got swim lanes of what are people doing, what are they thinking, what are they feeling, what tools are they using? And this could be outside of the product, right? It's about stretching that journey to the very beginning. It could be something offline as well. And maybe some ideas around the MVP, or do we need this or do we not need this, at an early phase? And what are those, phases of the journey? Where's the greatest pain point? Also, really important to capture. That elevator pitch, as I discussed. Then we looked at success metrics. So an example of this is what would make an awesome metric. So, and again, this is about education for the client or the stakeholder or whoever's there, not just a vanity metric or, but what would make this thing awesome? And how, we want to set that up early on so we know what we're designing for, what we're trying to gear towards, how we, if we want to scale. Now, this was not a hockey stick startup. This was very niche B2B, about getting a handful of clients to pay you a crazy amount of money, because it was about reducing a consulting experience that takes maybe 6 months, not to zero in pure digital, but not too different from functionally, which I'll share in a minute. But how do we take a consultant's experience that's very much about Excel spreadsheets and about manual processes and digitize some of that journey? So then we started looking at, okay, what does that mean? You've got a little bit of flow chart in there. You've got a little bit of screens. You rip this up a lot of times. This could take a whole day, right, to get into a storyboard and a scope of what are we doing, where's the start, where's the end. Now, this is not necessarily sequential, right? That's the other important thing. This happened over 2 weeks, these 5 days, because you might need some time in between to do some of these things, or it's too hard to book someone, which is totally okay. We've then got ideation. So we went from that storyboarding to, okay, what do these screens look like now? Could have a login screen, selection screen, variables. I purposefully haven't spoken too much about the subject matter because I want to focus more on the sprint. But basically, this was complex engineering and how we can simplify and give scenarios and variables based on certain inputs. So if you think of, I don't know, like an incident or an accident on a mining site, for example, or an oil rig or something, what are all of the inputs we need to put into some sort of a system to help us to make a decision on the best, the best way to resolve this. And the other thing, like I said, you can insert things depending on your need to do quickly, is we got some direction from the client, and then we just printed a whole heap of logos of whatever, random sites and colors, and maybe, components or design systems or patterns, and just got green and red Post-its for the clients. So, like I said, 3 of them, to just write what they liked and what they disliked, to get some more direction. When someone doesn't have the education to necessarily, or visual identity or anything like that, it's your job to, kind of tease that out of them, which was really useful. And again, it requires a bit of back and forth. But one other key thing I haven't kind of been mentioning is access to the client is super important. You can't outsource a design sprint, right? You need to have those subject matter experts with you there. And having, this founder made a massive difference. We then, as an agency, we did this work ourselves. So, and even, if you are in a client, like right now, a property finder, we would get to, in a workshop, maybe this level of, what are the, what are the screens? And then the low fidelity, really, you kind of need a designer, right? Even a lower mid fidelity. And that's all you need. It doesn't have to have color. It needs to have that basic, or the core functionality, and something that's testable. So how much you need depends. It's depends on your industry. And then the final day, like I said, this was kind of 4 days because the prototyping was done in between, was the most intense usability I've ever done. We smashed a whole day of testing, and did analysis in the same day. So the day before, create an interview guide. It's a whole other discussion. Maybe I'll do that, usability, lean usability testing at a future product people meetup. But one of the methods I use, short story, is just to have, like your Post-it notes, and this can be digitized as well, and be writing on the fly. That means that you're capturing, or you've got a few different people capturing what do you like, what do you dislike, what would you change, how would you rate this experience, thinking about your needs from 0 to 10 and why. And what we did was, whatever, the softwares, whatever you're using, we were using Envision, but it doesn't really matter what you're using. You could then, at the end of the day, at the end of these sessions, gather as a team and just put, lots of, notes on the actual prototype with what needs to be changed. Because like I said, this was super lean. We didn't have a lot of time. And this is directions for both design and then later also for development. So the other thing that is super important, and all of you would love this because this is where the product management comes in. I also, like, as a designer that's been around, I tinker and push my way into this area because I think it's important to have everyone at the table. Have a meeting with your engineers, front end, back end, potentially with, here we had the client in here as well, which was really important as well, to just draw the line on what is that MVP. We are, especially in this case, but even for any client, even if you're client side, you're limited. We have to deliver this in Q3, et cetera, et cetera. So, what are, whatever, could be, stories, features, whatever, brand of agile, or however you slice and dice things, t-shirt size, et cetera, must have, should have, could have, or whatever that might be. And also have the experience in the room to look at the complexity of actually, is it feasible? We had, like I said, 3 design delivery sprints. Can we deliver in that time? And what's going to be there for, a backlog or, future iterations. So this is not typically in a sprint, but I've added it because it's obviously a really important part. So the results I wanted to share, not my own work, amazing visual designer. He's funny enough also at Functionally, took the best and stole them for Functionally. And the theme was around, what does the color look like underwater, where these, offshore, like it's basically about decommissioning these offshore oil rigs. Sometimes they form a part of the natural environment. So it's better to keep them because marine life has been built around them. They've been in there for 20 years. So you might just chop off the top and leave the bottom of it. And that's what the software helped you to validate. So the color, the logo, was very much about the industry, and just wanted to share, a little bit of the output. And like some of the, we helped them as well with some of the, some of the other collateral. And this is more, kind of what that final product looked like. And it was done, in time to be launched, and basically giving you your optimum solution, as I've been alluding to, based on, the environment, technical, societal, whatever inputs you put in. It's a recommendation of how to decommission these oil rigs. So the lessons learned, we did very little, if no, research upfront, which I did flag with the client, but that's super important. Like I said in my intro, and it's very different in the world I find myself in now, because I run a large design team. We do qual, we do quant. Really important to have your qual research done upfront, and just to minimize the risk and establish that product market fit. Ensure that you're solving the right problem. You don't go into a sprint with little or no knowledge, or just somebody's idea, and like, let's just do this thing, And also, it's not just about that research, it's about, like I said, product usage, what are customers complaining about, etc. Recruitment time and access to the right customers, again, really important. Ensure that you've got the right people that you're going to be testing with. At the end, they are your customer. It's a known challenge for sprints, it's a known challenge for research, but making sure that it's something you do. Building the right design sprint team, we only had one subject matter expert, as I said. There were a couple of other co-founders, but limited access to them, and they didn't have a lot of expertise in this. Only having one person means you're not, questioning everything that you're doing. We just had to, rely on this one person. And when you're doing it for your own business, having a few of these people from different parts of the business, really important part to have. And ensure you have the right expertise on the team. You don't need to design high fidelity screens. A great multidisciplinary team with designers, front-end dev will work together to bring the vision to life. And this was awesome. So like I said, our visual product designer and the front-end developer were awesome. And they worked together. They had an amazing relationship. And once we could go from that low fidelity that you saw to a high fidelity without having to do high fidelity screens. That's just waste. So most companies, yes, you need to, and you do high fidelity screens. I know this is a rarity, but if you've got a mature design system, if you've got great front-end developers, you can look at where you can take shortcuts and just, give feedback, work together, make that collaborative. Working in parallel. Collaboration and co-creation with the client was really awesome. I mean, on this part. So he was basically in the office nearly every day, access to the project team. If there was any question at any point, we had immediate feedback, really valuable. The surface project issues early allowed, minimal blockers, which was really good. And sometimes that can be an issue, if you don't have necessarily the right people, or you don't involve technology, for example, and you leave them for after, that can be an issue because you want to answer these questions as soon as possible or kill an idea as soon as possible. So ensure that, your developer friends are there too. And the high client satisfaction was evident, in the launch event. So having the client involved throughout the whole experience made a massive difference because you've got buy-in throughout the whole process, and there is no surprise at the end. And it's the same with your senior stakeholders, if you're client side. So making sure not necessarily that they're in the sprint, but they've got that visibility, that communication is really key. I just noticed I need to add my battery pack. It's right here. I'll just be 2 seconds. Apologies for that. I did something and unplugged something. And that's pretty much it for Isobar. Happy to answer questions in the end. I'm going to get into functionally quite quickly. It's much shorter presentation. So to give you a super high level view, functionally, as we've been saying, is a startup. It helps fast-growing companies align their people. It's about looking at your organization, and when startups grow, they typically break because we don't know who does what, and we don't focus or spend time looking at how we should grow and growing from a holistic benefits view, as opposed to like your CTO saying, "I want more engineers and I don't care about anything else." Your head of product saying, "I just want product managers." The marketing person saying, "I just want more whatever, SEO people," and no one necessarily talking to each other. This software helps to align on all that. It's a really difficult design challenge. And this, again, similar to the one I just showed, went from the founder having a consultancy in terms of manual meetings with startups and just kind of everything in Excel, to how do we go from something really complicated to a digitized system. So you've got a physical journey, and where is there an opportunity to digitize that journey? And I had the benefit of starting with them very early on. So did a lot of that early research with one of the co-founders, just open, one-on-one conversations without any software. And Chloe, unfortunately, wasn't there. I do recall this, but I had one of the most amazing experiences I had. The launch was in February 2019, a little while ago at a conference. So it's launched, it's out there. You can check it out. Again, I'll share the link later on. So there was a good amount of discovery research done, but before the first design sprint, one of the, the CTO, one of the developers had done pretty much 100% of design and dev. It was kind of a segregated part of this startup because of these remote teams. So the initial idea, the aim of introducing design sprints wasn't just about the output, it was about getting more of the whole business to understand that we're a product company. We are not a product startup. We're not a consulting company. And you had a group of people who went into these startups, did a lot of meetings, introduced the software, did a lot of hand-holding, big sales team. And their index was, if we just improve this process, we would have a better experience. But it was about bringing design culture into the startup and getting buy-in also from everyone into the development and the design process. Massive challenge in time zones. We had, like I said, most of the kind of sales and operations people in the US, one of the co-founders in London, and then the rest of the team in Australia. To meet all of these time zones is near impossible. So the solution was 1 month or one sprint, and then development cycle, etc., would be with the US, and another one would be with Australia. One of our biggest challenges, because we're talking about non-designers, non-product people, was to understand, it was twofold. We wanted the USA design sprint was all about implementation people. So they had the customer viewpoint, but when it came to designing product, they didn't necessarily have all that experience, as I said, and they were just looking for, if the customer says this, then I just need to deliver what the customer says. And as all of you know, as product people, that's not what we do. It's not even about, asking people what do they want or how much they pay. It's about observing behavior. It's about getting that buy-in and creating, solutions that we then test to alleviate those problems. And on the flip side, the Australian team didn't have that visibility of the customer, so didn't have enough subject matter expertise. And sometimes, some of the ideas didn't exactly meet that, the ideal solution. But I'm showing that, the last thing you want is to have this amazing, Homer Simpson car with all the bells and whistles that nobody actually buys. So everyone says to you, that's what we want, but then when you deliver it, no one actually uses the thing. One important thing that we set up, so like I said, this was all in Miro as well as in Zoom, was a pre-sprint plan. So you can see here, we've got, instructions on how to download Miro, what to do, some inspiration, which I haven't shared here, but, some articles, some previous research that we've done, things that you want some homework for your team to do. Everyone to kind of meet each other, get familiar with the tool. So, sketch what you're looking at. What are the top 2 things you liked about the research? What is the challenge that we're solving in this sprint? Who are the personas we're solving for? And, and then we go around the room in the beginning and just the virtual room and share, these findings. So this looked a little bit different. And we reviewed that pre-sprint analysis, looked at some customer interviews. So these customer interviews were early on. And this, again, like if you look at the Jake Knapp book, you can do that. You can have your interviews and everyone just kind of listening and taking notes in the beginning of a sprint, just to add into the subject matter expertise and share that. We then had some homework. So we all created some, I don't know if you're familiar with the 8-up, but dividing a sheet into 8, some sketches. We then come together after we did those sketches and vote and critique some of these ideas, some of these solutions. Day 4 or meeting 4 was about collaboratively building, that initial, prototype. Then we've got, usability testing like you saw before and analysis. So it's slightly different, a few different activities, and all of this is just meetings on Zoom with, you know, people in different locations. So to reflect on this one, the focus on the problem we were solving and the solutions was really important. To not, you know, to not kind of have scope creep and go off track. There's no time to let any and all ideas, and it's really the facilitator's role to ensure that the focus is there. So you can't be too nice. And this is a little bit harder when you're doing it in Zoom as opposed to in person, because you just want to say to kind of people without being rude, look, cool, we got it, thanks, or, you know, kind of move people along and not have, because otherwise confusion can enter in, or you can have somebody not gonna, you know, have a go at anyone from any nationality. You can guess certain countries maybe are more confident or more imposing of their ideas, and you just want to have that, you know, kind of liberal approach to idea sharing. Sensible defaults and existing standards toolkits really help to have those guardrails. So it's an important part, you know, or having, you know, like design sprint ops, I would call it, or, you know, how do you operationalize this and ensure that, you know, like the pre-sprint, etc., happens. The activities worked well. I mean, this is, I think, like another one that I just want to share. I think like people sometimes get carried away with this, but not every design activity or design job necessarily needs to go through a sprint. It's about you having the, you know, the experience and choosing, is this right right now or not? And, you know, kind of, yeah, this was another really big challenge. I think sometimes if we just try to do this with people who are not necessarily, you know, designers or product people, it does pose a challenge, because you might just be designing things, like, and like I said earlier, without a technical person, that might be too hard to bring to life, or just not feasible. So really important. So to kind of wrap it all up, I've got some of the links that I've been mentioning here. So I'm sure we can, you know, share the hyperlinks. The Google Kit's really great. There's a lot of videos. There's a company in Germany, I'm sure most of you probably heard of them, AJ and Smart, who have, you know, operationalized and basically do sprints for a living. They do amazing videos as well. There's obviously the sprint book. And in terms of, you know, design sprint ops, I think that's about you just having that experience and looking for the tools, the resources, templates to ensure that this is done faster. So Isobar did a great job at this, for example. They had like a 3-day, a 5-day, and a 10-day sprint, depending on the size of the client. And there's toolkits that you can kind of go away with. And final thought is just remember, like I've been saying, this is just another tool in your toolkit, and make sure that it's the right time to use it. If you want to get in touch, like I said, add me on LinkedIn. Not many people on the planet with that surname, not too hard to find, and happy to answer any questions. Sorry if it went over time. Yeah, hope everyone enjoyed it. Happy to move into Q&A.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was awesome, and no problem on the time. We still have 15 minutes. We do have lots of questions already lined up for you. Someone is under the guise of Dwight from The Office, which I love, by the way. We have a question about the MVP discussion is prior to kicking off the sprint. I'm not sure how to rephrase that question. MVP discussion prior to kicking off the sprint, right, is what it says.
Yeah, look, I think I understand the question. Scope is what the question is asking. Like, should you go into a sprint with scope? And look, I mean, there can be different schools of thoughts. If this particular person disagrees, my view is very much that you do need to have guardrails. Yes, you need to be focused on the problem that you're solving. but you don't necessarily need to get into solution mode. That's a really important thing. So yes, you can have those guardrails, but it's not about what is in or what is out in the MVP, because you haven't got alignment yet. You haven't explored this yet. So it's a little too soon to have, to be jumping into solution mode and say, like, we're only doing the sprint for this little feature here, because then you're not exploring. You could be missing out on all of these things left and right. And sometimes something will come out, like you could come out of a sprint, do that usability at the end and go, actually, we don't have product market fit. People don't like this. We need another sprint. You don't want to, I think sometimes, not only product people, designers too, we fall too much into the trap of whatever, limitations are in front of us. We have 1 quarter, we have to deliver this by the 2nd month because we need that 3rd month. So we hit our OKRs and we show that this thing's in the wild. Sometimes we need to push those boundaries a little bit. Hopefully that answered the question.
I hope so. Dwight, let us know if that's the case. We have another one from Cynthia on YouTube. How did you do the recruiting of the customers who tested the design? This is a common question, actually. A lot of people ask this.
So recruiting is a really challenging one, to make sure that you have the right people and they're the right users. And you don't want to have the same person. Like I said, it's probably a separate talk. We are, funny enough, a part of research ops. I don't know if people have heard of research operations. On the 14th of September, shameless plug, I've got 3 different researchers, 1 in my team and 2 in other companies here in Dubai, to talk about how do you operationalize recruitment to ensure you had a talk in the past, always on discovery. So to ensure that you've got that machine fed in. And there's many ways. It depends if it's B2B, B2C. I think one important thing is it's not just about getting anyone and a random person. You've got really limited people. So make sure that it is your customer. So wherever your customer is. So I'm not gonna, say don't do this thing or don't do that. So for example, if you have an active social media team or experience and your customers are there and they're actively collaborating or whatever, communicating with your marketing team, you could recruit through social media. It's important that you maybe do a screener. So you might have a quick call or an email questionnaire. You make sure that, yes, you qualify that this is going to be the right person. Or it could be your sales team, amazing resource, right? If we're talking B2B, we have Salesforce. We know all of who our customers are. We know if they're a big customer, a little customer, medium, whatever, which role they play. So for us in property, you've got a decision maker, admin, an actual agent, and who we want to test this thing. Or if it's an end consumer, then there's feedback on our website. We've got, for example, on our website, a little pop-up to X% of our traffic that says, hey, if you want to help us with future research, fill out this little form. Yes, we need to qualify those people because they could be any random and might not be the right client, but there's lots of ways to recruitment. As I said, if you want to hear more, 14th September, hit me up. I'll share the link.
Please do. That would be great. Some other questions. Where are we up to? What are the typical next steps post the design sprint?
Yeah, another great question. We would hopefully at the end of the sprint have a low or mid fidelity validated design or direction. Now, I didn't talk about, I only showed one thing, right? You could have 2 designs or 3 that you want to test. You could do A/B testing on that final day. You could do ABC testing. Make sure that you rotate the order of what you show the design. It's not always the same one first, because otherwise you have bias towards a particular thing. And you can ask people, which one did you like and why? Why did you like it better? It can help you to make that decision. You would then go from, like you saw, we would go from a mid or low fidelity either to a high fidelity design and then work with a development team, or like I was saying, if you've got a mature, front end and design relationship and perhaps a mature design system, you can go from that straight into the, development sprint, straight after the design sprint. But it really depends. If you're a startup and you're one person, then maybe you want to add more juice and more meat to this particular prototype, do some more testing. It really depends on the size of our organization and how much time you have.
Yeah, I would agree. And we're doing that with a number of our clients at the moment who just completed a design sprint for a new product, essentially. And yeah, it's a big process, but we're still doing additional tests and additional scoping of what that might look like. So yeah, I think you can approach it in many ways depending on the company and the product and the feature. Another question here from Emmanuel says, what events within an organization require a repeat of the design sprint process after the first one is completed?
What events in an organization require a repeat?
Yeah, I think it's like when do you need to repeat the design sprint process?
So I get this question a lot, and it's not only for a design sprint, it's also for any design that we usability or user test or whatever you call. And to me, that is in essence the definition of product market fit. If you put your solution in front of people, and at the end of these particular tests that we do on the final day, we ask them that CSAT question, customer satisfaction. Thinking of your needs to complete this job to be done, how would you rate this experience from 0 to 10? And why? And what can we do to improve? If everyone tells you it's a 5 and it's not hitting the mark, then you probably need to go maybe back to the drawing board or taking their feedback. If everyone says we love it, it's awesome, yes, it's an 8, and for this particular job to be done, it's hitting all of my needs, and you get that sense anyway. It's not only that question, right? It's throughout the test. You will naturally have that feeling, whether you hit the mark or not.
Great. I have a question myself, actually. You mentioned the minimum viable design sprint. Do you have, in your experience, do you have an idea of what that looks like? Like if you want to test and do like a mini design sprint on a particular feature or something, what have you found works or is a minimum?
Yeah, so I have been doing a lot more MVP design sprints in my current role because, yeah, there's just no time, right? It's agile, the train's going, like you're lucky even if you get in some teams to do this. In other teams, they're just building stuff, and hopefully designers are involved in that particular area, and hopefully we're validating our biggest bets. But we're actually doing one next week, and I've done this similarly a month ago, and the minimum kind of viable sprint is about, number one, your journey map or your jobs to be done map, and getting enough research and data to say that this is the current state. This isn't a made up current state, because often we don't know what the current state is. No one does the current state journey map. We don't do them often enough. And we don't have all of those quant inputs around feature usage. What are customers support? What are people complaining about the most? What are the churn rates? What are customers actually saying about our products? Not what do we think on the inside with an arrogant hat on. So the step one of all of this would be the pre-sprint, so you can have like a sprint 0. My designers have been out there doing interviews, kind of jobs to be done interviews on the current state, filling in the gaps of what we don't know. So I did a quick current state journey map with the principal product manager and one other designer, really rough. And then I said to designers, now look, this is everything we know, the most experienced people have been here the longest. Can you fill out the other gaps? And that is an input into your design sprint day, if you will. So to get all of that qual, add the quant to it. So have representation from sales, from customer support, from the tech side, really important. And then to look at, okay, what does, if we've got alignment on the current state, which is often hard because everyone thinks it's different, what does the future look like? So potentially in a sprint, you could do, again, this is me entering things that aren't in your typical sprint, a future state vision. So what should the journey map look like in 18 months? If we do, even if it's one, say this one concept, and then you've got this, the rest of the sprint, however many sessions you need, just ideation around what does this concept look like. So it's about alignment on the current state journey. Maybe if you're doing strategy work, a future state journey, but you could go from current state to, okay, we know what we want to focus on, and let's just, ideate, get to that shared understanding of not just the concept, but the MVP of that concept.
Sure,
does that make sense?
Yeah, like, I guess establishing what the baseline, the current state is first, and then what are we actually working towards. That, yeah, I think that's logical.
And then testing that, super important, right?
Yeah.
We can't forget that bit, which is, let's just validate, not just push up the chain to the top, something that's just based on a hypothesis, but it's validated by customers that, yes, this makes sense.
Yeah, cool. We maybe have time for one more question. There's one comment here, one question. Amalia said, thank you, Jonathan. I'm actually taking the Design Sprint Masterclass by AJ and Smart and loving it. And really appreciated your case studies. And two, who I think is still here on the call, thank you, Jonathan, for the great UX presentation. Could you please explain to me more about success metrics on day 2 of the first case study? Why did you use this method? It is unfamiliar with me, so that I'm interested in getting to know it. Yeah,
and look, if someone is a purist, I just want to say, or if they're doing an AJ and Smart course, they might be going, what the hell is this guy on about? It's like like a spaghetti bolognese of a design sprint. But my main philosophy has always been, even with these new tools that come into our places, it's your job as the expert, as the product person, the designer, to choose what's right for you, to customize these tools, and sometimes bring in things that work, sometimes not. Look, and sometimes there is a time to do it by the book. That metric was about education for the client to just get alignment and clear, kind of like a North Star metric, if you will, on what would success look like for you, and how could this thing, like thinking a little bit outside the box, because engineers, like, no disrespect if anyone's on the call, this wasn't your developer engineer. This was like a super specialized engineer, offshore, very, very focused on something, getting them to think outside. Well, how could this thing be relevant to more than just one use case? So do we need people to share it? What does good usage look like? Do they need to be using the whole thing or just some of it? Or, trying to tease that out. And that was early on, before we even knew what, how many screens we needed or what the actual experience looked like. So for that particular client, it was just about, getting that alignment on that North Star metric.
Awesome, thank you. I think
Thank you.
There you go. I think we're out of time for any more questions, Jonathan. So thank you very, very much for joining us and sharing your insights. I think we have some links and some extra information, man. So can we share that around afterwards?
Yeah, if you, for those who are on the call, can I super quickly share them in the chat? And then also you'll have them in your, I'll just kind of copy and paste this really quick.
Thank you.
There you go.
Perfect.
Those are the key ones. And like I said, that first one, really, really awesome. I literally, for Isobar, just ripped that off, customized it to what I need, added a couple other things, but the stuff from Google, Google Ventures is really great.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, if you could leave us with one parting comment, Jonathan, what would that be? Your advice?
I mean, my main kind of parting comment is the best way to learn this is to just do it. And even if you are up and coming, or you're new to design, to product, do it on your own startup, or come up with an idea, not for that thing to be an amazing idea, but just to practice these principles. And if you're working in an organization, again, you don't have to do the full thing, but just try an ideation workshop where you're going to focus on a challenge and everyone's going to do a bit of sketching. to just see what happens, you know, and the best way to learn is to practice. So go out there and start sprinting.
Nice line there. Awesome. Thank you very much. We're back next Tuesday evening, or is it Wednesday next week, Mansoor?
Sorry, I forgot myself. Yeah, so next week it's going to be a Thursday morning session. Yeah, but then it's, yeah, at least we're maintaining the one event per week for everyone.
Awesome. All right. Thank you everyone for joining and for your awesome questions, and we'll hopefully see you next week.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, Chloe.
Bye.
Hello.
Bye.